Today I'm going to demonstrate how to create a drag and drop activity using the new Smart Notebook software that has been installed on your new laptops. Drag and drop activities can help you instructionally with elements number 8, previewing, element number 14, reviewing, and element number 17, examining similarities and differences. We are going to start by creating the graphics needed on the drag and drop screen. So the first thing that I'm going to use are some very simple text boxes and some very simple shapes. I'm going to do this by clicking on the A for text. Then I can choose the type of text that I want, click on my screen, and I can begin typing the text that I want. If I'm unhappy with where that text has been placed, I can hit the select arrow, and now I can move that text box wherever I want to on the screen. Since this is a category sort, I'm going to divide my screen into two sections. I'm going to do this by choosing the line, choosing the type of line that I want, and then drawing it on my screen. I am also going to have to set up the objects that are going to be later sorted during the activity. I do this in the same way. I select my text, select the type of text I want, click on my screen, type the text, select the arrow, and now I can move that text wherever I want to move it. I can also use my shapes. I'm going to add an oval around my shape. Notice though, when I start moving the object, the shape and the text move independently of each other. To prevent this from happening, I'm going to use my select tool. I'm going to draw a box around both the text and the oval. When I do this, both objects are highlighted. I'm going to click on one of the arrows in the upper right-hand corner, and I'm going to choose to group these two objects together. When I do that, notice how both objects move together. If at any time I decide that I would like the objects to move independently of each other, I can click on the little arrow and I can choose to ungroup the objects. Later, I'm going to have to program my activity so that the computer knows whether or not I am dragging and dropping the objects in the right locations. In order to do this, I'm going to create an area that we will call a target. I'm going to use a rectangle, and I'm going to draw a rectangle in the entire area that would accept objects that represent physical change. Now, I'm a little bit unhappy with how this target looks, so I'm going to click on that target, or I'm going to click on that rectangle, and I'm going to change it a little bit. I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to change the line color to white. I'm going to change the transparency to 0. So now I can't actually see that rectangle that I just created. It's still there, but I can't see it. I want the same thing for the chemical change side. So instead of going through the hassle of creating a new rectangle, I'm going to select the original rectangle I created, and I'm going to choose the little arrow, and I'm going to clone this object. Cloning is synonymous with copying. I copied another object, but it copied and pasted it all in one step. I am now going to move my cloned rectangle into the chemical change area. The next thing that I want to do is I want to think about all the areas on my screen that I want to remain locked in place versus the things that I want to be able to move. Basically, everything on the screen I want locked in place except for the objects in the holding area. The benefit to doing this is that when the students begin to play with this activity, you only want them to be able to move certain pieces. Otherwise, it's going to ruin your activity. So in order to lock these pieces in place, I'm going to select one of the objects, click on the little arrow, choose lock, and choose to lock it in place. I'm going to now do this for each one of the objects that are on my screen. I'm going to do it for not only the text boxes, but I'm also going to do it for the lines as well. Now that you've locked all the important pieces into place, it's time to set up the drag and drop activity. You are going to do this by clicking on the little puzzle piece for add-ins, and you are going to choose the Activity Builder add-in. To get started, you are going to select an object that is going to be your target. So for me, I'm going to select that transparent rectangle I created under the physical change category. Notice how it is selected now. Once I select that, I'm going to click on Edit. And when I click on Edit, notice how it put the blue and white lines across that target area. Now I've got to tell the computer which objects should be accepted into this area. So I'm going to look at my objects that I created on the bottom of the screen, and I'm going to look for an object that represents a physical change, which is cutting paper. So I'm going to move this object over here on the left to the Accept These Objects category. This tells the computer that when I drag cutting paper into this square, it's a good thing. If I made a mistake and I don't want this object to be accepted, I can simply drag this object into the trash can and it is no longer accepted there. So I'm going to go ahead and move cutting paper into the Accept. Now I'm going to take my other objects that are not physical changes and I'm going to move them into the Reject area. This tells the computer that when the students move a chemical change object into the physical change box, it is not correct and therefore they should be rejected. Notice how it puts little X's or green checks next to the objects so you can easily see whether they should be accepted or rejected. The last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the settings box and I'm going to tell the computer what action to do when the object is accepted or rejected. So underneath the animation box for accepting objects, I'm going to choose none, because when the students move the object to the physical change and it's accepted, I want that object to stay there. If I choose something like fade out, that object is going to disappear, and I don't want it to disappear. I also have the option of telling the computer what to do when the object is rejected. If I choose none, and the student puts the object in the wrong place, it won't let the student know that the object is in the wrong place. However, if I choose bounce back, and the answer is wrong, then the object will bounce back to the holding area. So once I've selected these settings, I hit done, and I've set it up for physical change. Now I'm going to do the same thing for chemical change. I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to click on my invisible rectangle, I'm going to edit, I'm going to drag my chemical change examples into the Accept These Objects box. The only thing I have left is cutting paper, because that's not a chemical change. So I'm going to click the Add All Remaining, and that's going to add cutting paper to the Reject These Objects box. This is a great option if you have a lot of objects. That way you don't have to keep on dragging all the objects that are rejected. You can just simply press a button and all the remaining objects will move into the rejected area. I'm going to do the same thing for my settings. I'm going to choose the correct settings that I want. I'm going to click Done. And now my activity has been programmed. Now that you've programmed the activity, it's time to try it out. I'm going to switch over to full screen mode. And now I'm going to attempt to drag my objects to the correct targets. So for instance, burning paper. That should be a chemical change, so let's see if I'm correct. Based on the fact that the burning paper object stayed on chemical change, I must be correct. Let's see what happens when I'm not correct. Let's take rusting metal and move it to physical change. Notice because I wasn't correct, it moved back to the holding area. If I put it in the correct spot, it stays. And there you have a drag and drop. Now that you know how to create this type of activity, the only limit is your imagination. So go out and give it a try.